Live streaming is on.
Do what I want.
Okay, well, I guess we're starting then.
All right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Southeast Linux. No, this is not Southeast Linux, guys. This is the Upstate Carolina Linux Users Group and the Columbia Linux Users Group, South Carolina Linux Users Groups. That's what it is. I was going to say South Carolina Linux Users Groups, not Southeast. Anyway, I'm a part of all those things, so I don't. Anyway, I'm glad everyone could come down tonight. Everyone that came online. Ben, how many people you got in Columbia?
Oh, about 100,000.
Yep, figures. Well, anyway, tonight I'm glad to have Cal with us here tonight. He's going to talk about his experiences with MUDs, and
right.
a particular MUD. Like I said, I saw this a couple months ago. It was fantastic, and I learned a lot. And I will let you take it away, and I'll turn my camera off. Thank you.
Awesome.
Cal.
Welcome, everyone. This is Muddy Lessons, where this talk is effectively about me. I just didn't bother to put in about me in there because I felt that would be a little bit too much. It was a little interesting putting this talk together, but I thought it was a pretty good idea, and it's landed pretty well, so here we are. Welcome to Muddy Lessons. I'm going to go over a little bit about MUD history, MUDs, multi-user dungeons, then my discovery journey into them, and then the lessons I've learned throughout my life, effectively, through working with MUDs, particularly one MUD called BlackMUD, and then some takeaways. So we got a diverse crowd here, various ages, and the only reason I call that out is MUDs kind of came out of the late 70s and early 80s. One of the most known games just in text-based adventures is Zork. So that's one of those. It's not a multiplayer, it's a standalone. You can download it, run it local, and you interact purely by typing on the keyboard and getting feedback. It's pretty much if you've worked any command line for Windows, Mac, or Linux, it's that, but a game. So there's always objectives. MUDs just took that and made it available with additional players. They really came out of universities at first, and then they started pivoting their way, the internet. At one point, I need to find the old article to be able to reference it, but at one point there was a claim that MUD traffic took up 17% of the traffic that was on the internet. So at one point they were actually in their heyday, and this was before graphical MMORPGs, which was the next evolution of the MUD. In fact, many early MUD developers kind of went into the MMORPG genre. There's even some, if you do some Googling, like old school drama from like claims of EverQuest and code stealing from old school MUDs, which were disputed. But I mean, that just kind of shows you the ecosystem at the time, because there were so many familiarities between certain MUD code bases and games like EverQuest or Ultima Online. So I have this here. Would you like to play a game? So BlackMUD's available right now. If you have a laptop and you so happen to want to play, you can hop on there right now and kind of just poke around. I plan to, at the end of the talk, bring it up and just show you the live game. It'll be from my lens, which is that of an admin, so I can go all around the world and I can spy on the players if there are any players, or even, well, maybe that mob they're fighting becomes a little bit more challenging for some odd reason. That's the kind of things you can do as an admin in these games, or for board players. But these are all the details that you would need to be able to play. Now, you don't need a MUD client, but I highly recommend it, and I'll show you why. But this is played over the Telnet technology, so all you really need is Telnet, and you can play. BlackMUD is not available over SSH or any type of secure means at the moment. So if you were to play, everything's sent over the internet in clear text. Just keep that in mind. Don't, use best security practices and don't reuse any key passwords. That said, in all the 30 years that BlackMUD has been running, we've known instance of anyone doing like man in the middle, capturing your packets and logging into someone else's account, mainly because we're just not that significant. So a little bit of MUD history, and hopefully this is visible enough, but I have on here, this is kind of the MUD family tree. And I mean, MUDs come and go, but we're really looking at MUDs that have either stuck around or a little bit of significance. And the main call out here, and I'm going to have another little bit more zoomed in view here, but in 1978 in the upper left-hand corner is MUD 1. That then became AberMUD. And then from there, some families came out. So this is kind of showing the different families of MUDs. So the AberMUD was its own family where basically these are code bases where original creators made these, and then periodically, sometimes the same folks would be involved and they did version 2. Other times it's complete other teams would take that code base and make changes and release that next version. So generally these are open source available code bases that you can just do whatever you would like with. So Daiku is a class of family, and then we have here, to read these out, Tiny Muds on the far right, and an LP Mud is in the middle. And there's another class of muds called moos. You know, true mudders don't really like to talk about moos, but moos can be pretty fun. You can actually do like your own programming and coding in a sort of way inside moos. So moos are kind of cool. Never touched them myself though, because it's like my mind couldn't get no idea. So zooming in here a little bit, there's that AberMUD, then DaikuMUD. So we pretty much zoomed into the DaikuMUD family tree, and you can see from DaikuMUD came Silly Mud, comes BlackMUD. So BlackMUD is the game that I first started playing in roughly like 1998, but the game itself spun out in 1993. And so this game's lineage is pretty early on the family tree. Like we spun out pretty early on. If you connect and type either history or like help, credits, we still, as appropriate, show all the correct credits to all the original creators of the family tree of our MUD. So bringing this back to me locally, how did I get into MUDs? Well, before mudding, roughly around the age 9 to 12, in my household was an IBM 8088. Now, no, I wasn't allowed to touch this IBM 8088. This was for official stuff only. My dad happened to be a police officer, and my mom thought that, hey, this would be a game that my dad would play. And this basically meant that when my parents weren't home, I would fire this game up and play it. And if anyone, this is from Sierra Entertainment. So Sierra was a pretty large, successful game maker during the, I'd say, mid 90s to late 90s. I mean, early 2000s, they started tapering off. But Police Quest was a hit of theirs. They had many hits of these adventure games. And you can kind of see the prompt right there at the bottom. So it was a combo of a graphical interface where I can use the arrow keys. I don't think WASD was a thing at that time. I think it was pure arrow keys. This is just from memory. And you move your character around. Let's say I'm at that door. If I walked into it, I would just bump into the door. I would have to type on the keyboard and say open door. And then it would give me the feedback. And it might say the door's locked. And I'd have to say unlock door and then open door. If I say unlock door and I didn't have the keys, it would tell me I didn't have the keys. So I would go to play this game, and I would probably spend sometimes what felt like an eternity and make no progress. Just getting out of that police station and actually to the point where you could drive the car took me it probably was over 2 months, a month, because I didn't have a manual, I didn't have a guide, I was just doing it. But that was that mindset of figuring it out, which was a lot of fun. So fast forward a little bit, and around the age of 14, that is me in that time period. That's a little bit of a picture of my setup. If you would have seen it from the other side, there's probably an empty pizza box or something sitting on the tower over there. So there was a couple congregations or collisions of interests in my life at the time. The internet was kind of, AOL was a thing, and I was definitely able to connect to it because I helped my neighbor one day with her issues logging into AOL. So that happened to get me her username and password because I happened to help her type it into her computer. So I happened to get on AOL until I got her kicked off and banned. But that's a different story for a different day. I found IRC, Internet Relay Chat. So I was kind of getting plugged into this online world. Of course, I was a script kiddie. I looked like a script kiddie. So I managed to find these hacking tools. I didn't know how to write hacking tools. I just know how to use them. didn't really know what they did other than, man, these things do work and they kick people off the internet, or I could open someone's CD tray. I did to my buddy Adam, or my meanest one I probably did to him was I replayed the Windows shutdown chime like 1,000 times. And he couldn't do much about it except turn his speakers down or turn his computer off. And I was also found and discovered Dungeons and Dragons, which led me to MUDs, because man, when I first played Dungeons and Dragons, which was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so 2.0, man, that game hooked me. I really enjoyed playing that game, but we only played like once a week or every other week, and that was not frequent enough for me. So it led me to go into my other interests and say, where the heck can I play Dungeons and Dragons online? And I found a few different things. I found in IRC there were some rooms that you could play, but it wasn't, you still needed people in order to be able to play and interact. There were bulletin board systems where you could play, but you still needed people in order to be able to play, and that didn't really fit my need to kind of get that itch scratched. So I discovered MUDs, the text-based adventure game. Allowed me to play D&D whenever I wanted, and it was great. So I discovered BlackMUD. I think that was one of the first MUDs I discovered. I have no idea how I found that one. I mean, there was some websites that gave you a listing. Some clients would give you listings. I'm not quite sure how I discovered that one, but that was one of the first ones I discovered, and I noticed right away it was very D&D-like. It had the right classes, it had the right type of fantasy setting. It was very hack and slash, but there were some role players to it too that were in character in the game. The other family I found, which was on that family tree, is called God Wars, and God Wars was all about the player versus player. So it was really hack and slash. There were a lot of spin-offs, and inside there it was really cool in the sense that you could be a monk from Dungeons and Dragons fighting a werewolf, and in some varieties there would be things like Jedis from Star Wars or Saiyans from Dragon Ball Z. And so you could be a Super Saiyan going up against an angel. That's cool. And the whole object was, of course, is I want to kill you. Like, and you got points, and it helped you power up. The more people you killed, actual people, the stronger you were able to get. And it was this whole hook system that was pretty cool and fun. So back on the BlackMUD timeline, around 98 is when I first became a player. So from 98 to about 2003, I was purely a player. As a player, I was pretty good at finding bugs in the game. So I would find bugs. My general MO when I found a bug was I really wanted to understand the bug, which meant I would abuse said bug until I really understood the bug and got my benefits from it, at which point I would then hand it over to the admin team saying, hey, by the way, I found this bug. Here's how you can exploit it if you want me to show you. I could certainly do that, which netted me some good relationships with some of the admin team. I use the term immortal because in the game, an admin in these types of games traditionally is an immortal. They're a god inside the game. And in some of them, they're worshipable. So in BlackMUD, if you choose the right alignment schema, you could worship me as in my deity inside the game. I'm a chaotic neutral / chaotic evil, no, neutral evil deity, as I am a representation of nature's chaotic element. So I try to rebalance the scales by any means necessary. That's my deity. So in 2003, I became part of the admin team. And so for 2003 to 2019, I assisted players. I would run quests. I would continue to find bugs. And unfortunately, I couldn't really just take advantage of exploiting them, because if I wanted to cheat, I could just use my immortal to buff up my mortal and then cheat that way, which I would do sometimes for testing. And then I would also make some content or redo some areas and allow players to have some new experiences. Just take that creative outlet of, oh man, it's like a DM, a dungeon master creating a campaign. It's like I can update an area in the game and create an experience. But interestingly enough, around 2020, it's good to say in 2003, when I first applied, the head guy of the MUD actually gave me back my application. So like 20 years later, he gives me a copy of my application. So I don't even really remember what was on the application. And But I very clearly wrote in there, because I was in college for software development for my associate's degree. And so, of course, I was highlighting, I really want to code for this game. I really want to do development for BlackMUD. That's what I would like to do the most. And I'll do whatever I need to do in the interim until I get to said point where I can do this game development. Well, you see how long it took? Oh my God, why did I stick around that long? But I did. So this is right around the COVID time. So the main guy actually was on hiatus for a long time. He lived in Japan. He did all kinds of things. Like BlackMUD wasn't his focus. There was enough admins though that kept the game running, that had the ability to. So that's what we did. But COVID caused him to return, and he wanted to work on his best creative outlet project he had, which was this. And so it brought about that interest. And through that, I gained access to the code. So let's get into some lessons. So from like 98, 2001, it taught me how to type. And I run a community, DEFCON 864, and we had in one of our random channels, like there's a website, of course, where you can do typing speeds. So there was a speed contest. I didn't go to just type 118 words per minute. We were tossing up these little screenshots. So I was like, hey, effective typing, it was rooted in BlackMUD, because when crap was getting real and you're about to die, well, the faster I could type rec recall for recite recall to get my butt out of danger, you could bet I could type that really quickly. I still can. Command fuzzing. So, throughout my career, I've worked on switches and different operating systems and who knows, all different types of application command line interfaces. Well, I learned how to fuzz commands just from MUDs. And fuzzing commands is basically, it's the art of figuring out what commands are open to me and what do they do on a prompt. And a MUD is just a prompt. So here we're actually looking at inside the game, and I highlight this. There's an enormous fountain in the shape of a dragon, pours forth cool water. And so I tried chug fountain. I'm really thirsty. I want to chug from it. And so the game returns back, pardon? All right. So that didn't work. Well, let me see if I can swim in the fountain. And it does give me a different return back, but it says, okay, you're now prepared to swim. All right. So clearly that didn't do what I intended to do. Maybe I could try swim in fountain, but no, I tried to read from the fountain. That didn't work. I tried to L or look at the fountain. That did nothing. I said exam fountain for examine. And that showed me I could look inside and it was full of a clear liquid. Then I tried drink fountain and it gave me the return of I was able to drink from it. So this is just showing you're at a prompt. You have no idea what all you can do outside of trying different things. There are help systems generally in MUDs, but those help systems can vary large and wide. And the main thing I would be doing here is typing help chug, help swim, help read. Well, it's just as fast for me to type those commands as it is to type help for those commands to see if that command even exists. It also taught me the fundamentals of scripting. So these MUD clients, which I'll show some of those throughout the eras, had their own scripting languages. Some later ones eventually started tapping into some, I would say, more formal scripting languages like Lua, Perl, Python, Bash. And it also exposed me even to Linux and, of course, understanding Telnet. It's funny that I first gained access to Linux, not even knowing that what I was on was Linux, because there was a guy in the server that gave me a shell, and I could log into the shell, and I learned that from that shell, I could kick people off of IRC. So I thought that was pretty cool. Fast forward to 2002 to 2012, my scripting skills got a little bit better. It worked into my troubleshooting. I learned data schemas, and inside of these MUD clients, because it's all text, regex is commonly used as a way to grab text. So I applied that in my coding and started automating. So say my character was hungry, it could automatically know what food I had inside my bags and get the foods out of my bags and eat the food when I was hungry. So I put some pictures up here. This is new. This wasn't in my December talk. So I like to highlight this because, so this is Wallops Island, Virginia. This is where I worked during that time of 2002 to 2012, a little bit after that. But at that site, I was an administrator over some switching systems. And these switching systems weren't so much your conventional switches of TCP/IP. These were military switching systems that physically switched interfaces. And so these are examples of those on the right. I brought in a MUD client because these things typically communicated over Telnet. Some of them worked over SSH. They were all managed by a VAX. That was the master switch controller. But I brought in this MUD client and I coded in some aliases, so basically a single command that would issue multiple commands based off of that. And it wasn't so much for myself, but I did it to enable my team because I was one of 2 advanced switch administrators that knew these switches inside and out. And so me or my buddy Rich would be the ones that would get called if there were ever any problems. So I created some troubleshooting assisting commands that leverage the same tools I would use in a MUD client to automate certain steps. So it would like disconnect this side, clear, and then reconnect, and then you could test again.
These are like telco switches?
No, they're like military low-level serial and high-level serial. Yeah, some of them were fiber optic. Some of them were low-level serial that would get converted into fiber optics that would then, at the other end, get turned back into like low-level serial. So we even had one FIDI network and one token ring network, or a couple token ring networks. So it was a good playground for different technologies, but most of the switching we did here was not any TCP/IP or telco. It was all proprietary military stuff. 2013 into 2020, I just got even better at scripting, so I'm going to show some examples of that. I got into API calls and data translation. So effectively, mudding was making me a data engineer. Didn't really intend it. It was just a byproduct because now I was working with APIs, like we had an item database. So I want to fetch the stats of this item that's in my inventory from this item database and allow me to see it inside my client. And there you go. Now at present, so 2020 onward, this is when I got into the development side. So I really got into learning C, and the more modern MUD client, Mudlet, uses Lua. So I've been learning Lua as a language. And now I know exactly what I'm doing. So I'm doing extract, translate, and loading of data as a part of my development. And we've a larger team, so we actually employ agile methodologies with very long sprints. But we do use tools like Confluence and Jira, release management, and we try to do what testing we can to not release bugs as we can. So I'm going to show a little bit of MUD clients. So this is the first one I had really started out with, which was ZMUD. Now this is showing version 7.11. So when I started, it was probably version 2.11 or 2.1. So this has a lot of it's pretty sexy for what it is, for the era it is. This went end of life 2005. Its scripting language was ZScript. So when I was learning scripting, I was learning this proprietary ZScript, and it's worth noting that this client is still used by players today. So. Oh yeah. So MUD players, like, they hold on to their MUD clients like to their last days because they did a lot of work configuring and scripting and everything else that they don't want to quite let it go. But I will say they get harder and harder to run. Like in Windows, as we're now on Windows 11. Man, I can only imagine trying to run ZMUD in Windows 11. It was hard even in Windows 7. So ZMUD then became CMUD from the same guy, Zuck Software. This one went end of life in 2011. Still running ZScript. You can tell it's just a little bit cleaner, harder to read the content, but this one actually is BlackMUD at this time. The other one was just a screenshot from the internet because I couldn't find a good ZMUD screenshot. This guy went end of life, 2011. Again, of course, still in use by players today. I guess I have, so here's some examples from stuff I did inside CMUD, and I'll blow these up. But Forager, you could forage inside the game. And this is like when you type the Forager command, it would basically give me a menu for myself to forage for food in the game, and it was botting. And so do I want to bot the labyrinth for 50 rooms? Lab 2 is under 40 rooms. Great all the time, which basically meant only great rooms that could produce the best results And so the bot would just run around. But you can see here, the last room number I was in, the last location I was in, my current step, my forage count. It was fully automated. It was fun. And this is an example of what that output that we just saw looked like in ZScript. So pretty basic stuff, but you can see reference to variables here. You're using ANSI to call out the color counts. And the core command I'm calling here is say, to say to me in my terminal. It's not outputting it to the game, it's just reflecting it to me. Let's see, here's another example. This was still Forager, and I'll blow this up. Let's see, right there. So Forager, the main thing it did also was, this is inside the game, like these are 2 example foods that I would forage, and it's a small, wrinkled, smooth strawberry. Well, the descriptor there describes an effect or a spell that food's gonna grant when I eat it. So I would translate that in real time as I typed inventory to what the spell names are, and then color code the positive effects in blue and the negative effects in red. So sense life, sleep, feeble mind, strawberry. You didn't want to eat that one. It'll make you stupid and sleep. Or a blindness fruit. You didn't want to eat that one either. But you could give them to someone else and they might want to eat them. That code's available if you just want to look at what some of that stuff looks like. I have that on my GitHub. No longer use it, but it worked pretty well if you just want to look at what that code was like. The other advanced thing I felt I did was there was a mapper in this system, and it was designed for you to move room to room and map as you walked around. And so I just saw it had some APIs inside the code, so I rewrote my own using my Immortal. And so I had my Immortal go room to room programmatically, like in sequence, and create the rooms and stitch them together. So what I was able to achieve was actually mapping out the entire game. So this is a reflection of that. This might be missing a little bit, but that's the game visually. And that was a thing I always wanted to do as a kid. As a kid, I actually, or teen, used graph paper, and I would map out the areas to give me a visual semblance of where it was I was and what it is I was working with. I remember specifically